only to be driven from the home 2 years afterwards because of just too many unexplained paranormal events. In fact, the paranormal events were so bad, they didn't allow the Shermans to continue living in the house, living on the property. Now, the odd thing is, when the Shermans moved into the house on the property, they found deadbolts on the doors and windows. The windows. In fact, some of the doors and windows had deadbolts on the inside and on the outside, which was very odd. They also found large chains outside that looked like, well, they were used for restraining a heavy animal. Now, were they used for restraining a heavy animal? I don't know. But if not, then what? Now, the Shermans did live on the ranch for over 2 years, and they experienced multiple cattle mutilations, crop circles. They heard voices calling from nowhere, inanimate objects moving before their eyes, skinwalkers. UFOs, again, associated with skinwalkers. Seeing strange birds, strange animals. Some animals, they had no idea what they were on their property. In fact, the Shermans tell of one story, one instance, where the family saw a large wolf attacking their cattle. So they shot the wolf, naturally, with a handgun. The wolf didn't react to the gunshots at all. In fact, he emptied the handgun into the wolf, and it appeared unharmed when it finally just continued to attack the cattle. And after they emptied the gun into the wolf, it just ran off. And eventually, after trying to be tracked, vanished. They lost it. In another instance, the family saw their field was just lit up by lights like it was a football stadium. Again, this is in the middle of nowhere, okay? They saw 2 UFOs, and the UFOs were the size of 2 football fields. They also saw some type of figure over 7 feet tall walking near the UFOs. Now, again, these were described as UFOs, not spaceships, more like orbs than UFOs, okay? And again, the term UFO, unidentified flying object. This was some object that was flying. They didn't know what it was. Didn't say it was a flying saucer. They described it as a UFO. 2 years into living on the ranch, the family had lost 20% of their cattle to cattle mutilations, okay? Now, you can say what you will. Were they skittish? Were they just suspect of the deadbolts on the inside and the outside of the house? That's fine. But the fact of the matter is, the real reason they left their home 2 years later, in 1996, they couldn't make a living. Something kept coming in and mutilating the cattle, okay? So that was it. They were done. In 1996, the ranch was bought. In fact, bought it from the Shermans by a man named Robert Bigelow, a billionaire. Robert Bigelow made his money in real estate. In fact, there's a chain of motels, budget motels called Budget Suites. That's Roger Bigelow, okay? He was the founder and owner of Budget Suites and a lot of other properties as well. He bought the ranch for $200,000, and he decided to move to it a paranormal research group. And he called this group the National Institute for Discovery of Science. And they operated on the ranch until 2004. The organization later was replaced by the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. So here's a billionaire who bought this thing up and invested money into this thing to research all this paranormal activity that was on the ranch, that was in the area. Again, if this were just figments of people's imagination, why would a billionaire buy the property and sink all this money into it, okay? In fact, Bigelow, between 1996 and 2007, when he sold it, he said there were lots of finding UFOs in the area that were not consistent with military aircraft. In other words, that part of the country has a lot of military aircraft flying around it. Bigelow owns an aerospace company. He knows what aircraft are all about. He said what these were flying in this area, sorry, Charlie, they were not military aircraft. You would think a guy like Bigelow would know, wouldn't you? Okay? Now, a little bit of information on Robert Bigelow. Okay, everybody knows he's a billionaire. Okay, a billionaire buys a ranch haunted by UFOs, shapeshifters, and ghosts and aliens for $200,000. Not a big deal. But who is this guy? Robert Bigelow. Sure, he's a billionaire. But he started investing in real estate property in the 1960s. Commercial real estate hotels, motels, apartments. In his real estate career, in fact, he founded Budget Inns, as I mentioned before, and he built about 15,000 units, purchased another 8,000 units. And for most of his career, he basically just bought and held, like you do in a Monopoly game, okay? But eventually dumped it all, unloaded it in the boom years before the 2008 crash. So that's how he made his money, real estate. In fact, in 2013, Bigelow kind of reflected on how he made money. He says, people just wanted to throw money away, and so I was just kind of lucky. He bought low, sold high. Again, in 1995, before he bought the ranch, Bigelow founded the National Institute for Discovery Science, and he wanted to research and study various fringe sciences and paranormal topics, most notably ufology, cattle mutilation, black triangle reports, and the like. In other words, I'm worth billions of dollars. I can do with my money as I like. In fact, he even indicated plans to spend up to $500 million to develop the first commercial space station. That was after he founded Bigelow Aerospace. And that's about a third of the budget that NASA expected to spend on a single space shuttle mission. Okay? Now, Bigelow Aerospace, they've actually launched two experimental space modules, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. That's what they called them. And it has plans for full-scale manned habitats to be used as orbital hotels, research labs, and factories. Now, a plan is not a reality, but again, I'm mentioning all this because this Robert Bigelow isn't just a kook. He's a visionary, okay? In fact, Bigelow had a module called the Beam module, and it was actually launched to the International Space Station on April 8th, 2016, on the 8th SpaceX cargo resupply mission. So Bigelow Aerospace isn't just some UFO fringe company. They really do build stuff. They really have used it. The Beam module actually went up to the International Space Station, okay? So before you discount Robert Bigelow as just a kook and a nut, know that his company has built modules that have gone up to the space station, okay? Now, he said, Bigelow, back in 2013, the reason he went into the commercial real estate business was to obtain the requisite sources to be able to fund a developmental space destination team. He's been on Coast to Coast before, so you may have heard him on there. But he still wants to make something he calls a inflatable space hotel by 2022, okay? It's supposed to cost $2.3 billion to do this. Now, again, the reason I mention all this stuff about Robert Bigelow is before you just discount him as a kook, he's putting his own money into this stuff, okay? Now, one other thing I wanted to note about Robert Bigelow before we move on. Robert Bigelow, as reported by the New York Times back in December 2017, had a conversation with then Nevada Senator Harry Reid, and he wanted to initiate what became the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which was a real deal, and it actually operated between 2007 and 2012, and that was the space program that Luis Elizondo was involved in. Bigelow wanted to bring that back and had that discussion with Harry Reid because they wanted to study UFOs a little bit further. Bigelow was going to put some money into this as well. Did that happen? It's interesting because we don't know. So many of these things, it's denial. Then 5, 10, 15 years after the plug is pulled, the government comes out and says, oh, by the way, back between here and here, we really did this stuff. So was Bigelow able to convince Senator Reid at that time to reinitiate this Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program? We probably won't know for another 5 or 6 years. It may be going on right now, as far as we know. But many of these studies, Operation Blue Book, the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, all of those took place. They took your tax dollars, my tax dollars, and they actually put forth a program that studied UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They've done this. They're probably doing this right now. Now, all that being said, you may want to ask the question of Robert Bigelow. Is he just a businessman? Because sure, he had Bigelow Aerospace. He's made money with that. But when he bought the Skinwalker Ranch for $200,000 back in 1996, he sold it in 2017 for $4.5 million. So he made quite a killing on this. Now, the fact is, Robert Bigelow is a very shrewd real estate investor. He made billions on real estate. Billions. Now, could this purchase of the Skinwalker Ranch just have been buy it, hype it, sell it? Maybe. That's a possibility. But if he had, why did he put all this money into it? He put millions of dollars into this Skinwalker Ranch, but then he sold it for many millions more. Bottom line is, he made money on the transaction. So again, I'm not going to, I'm not going to go out here and say, look, this guy is definitely a scientific genius. He's not a opportunist. He's not just an entrepreneur. I'm not going to say that. As I like to do in these podcasts, I'm going to put out as much information, and you can decide who is Robert Bigelow and what does he do. Okay? You decide, not me. But who bought the Skinwalker Ranch from Robert Bigelow? Well, it was a real estate investor named Brandon Fugal. He's a Utah real estate tycoon. He bought the 500-plus acre ranch from Bigelow. And Fugal actually wants to, pardon me, it's early in the morning, folks. I'm still trying to clear my throat. Let me get a sip of water here. Thank you. But Brandon Fugal, he sought to build on the whole Bigelow routine of trying to figure out what the heck is going on at the Skinwalker Ranch. Now, originally, when this was purchased, Fugal didn't let it known that he was the purchaser. It was officially owned by a holding company called Amadium Real Estate. Okay, now this became a secret until actually Fugal had an interview with Vice on the online news service, in which Fugal described his plans for the property and its alleged mysteries. While he really didn't disclose how much he paid Bigelow for the property, but Bigelow kind of said what he paid, $4.5 million. Okay. Now, here's what Fugal did say. He said, look, science and discovery are what drive me. This is according to Vice Online. Science and discovery are what drive me. It's not money. It's not that I'm obsessed with UFOs or little green men or cattle mutilation or shape-shifting demonic entities. I have no idea if aliens exist. You'll have to ask them. That's what Fugal said. But he did buy the ranch. Okay? He bought the ranch, and he's investing lots of money into it. In fact, he's installed sensors and cameras on the Skinwalker Ranch. He's hired staff, and so far has collected unreleased footage of anomalous aerial phenomenon, as he calls it. And in addition to evidence that anomalous injuries and transient EMFs, which are unexplained electrical phenomenon, have occurred. In other words, electrical pulses that they can't explain. Okay. Now, this, in addition to numerous UFO sightings and the previous data collected at the Skinwalker Ranch by Bigelow, have just caused Fugal to just be inundated with information. Now, Fugal also describes this as the greatest science project of our time.